You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that.
It's time to talk about it.
Pull up a chair and take a seat.
We're serving up recipes for life.
With Hampton University's Dr. Richard Mason and Dr. Tamara Williams.
Welcome to the Sunday Brunch.
This is Dr. Tamara Williams.
And this is Dr. Richard Mason. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Brunch with the Good Doctors. It's always good to be back at the table with you.
It's always great to be at the table with you. I look forward to us having our conversations every week at the table.
Exactly. Besides the food and the brunch, of course, you know, I'm a fat boy. I like to eat. So
we do love that aspect. We do enjoy the food part, but it is nice to be together and really have the conversations that are important.
Exactly. You know, one of the things that since we've been doing Sunday Brunch, you know, just meeting people out in the community, I'm hearing lots of great things just in terms of the topics that we have and some of the remedies that people hear. And what's been really positive is being able to normalize some of the situations that people have come on the show, you know, come to the table to share. And others, it's giving them a voice to be able to talk to someone or at least recognize some of the things that have gone on in their lives that they may need some help in, or at least be able to dialogue and have a conversation about some of those things.
And know that it's okay.
Exactly.
To have that conversation. So I'm really excited about today's topic too, because we're going to continue our conversation on mental health. And what I like the most about it is that it's okay that we have issues or concerns. It's what we do about it. Knowing that you can do something about it, I think that's the most powerful part.
Exactly. And seeking help and not feeling, you know, ashamed. One of the things that I try to do as much as I can in various opportunities that I'm blessed with in terms of speaking engagements and all, I really try to normalize mental health, because one of the things that we do, especially as a Black community, we tend to shame, you know, mental health. You know, I always tell the story of my great aunt who used to always take nerve pills. It wasn't until I got into the profession and went to visit, and she said, "Pass me my nerve pills," and I looked at the bottle and it was Xanax. You know, it's like, oh my God, she's been dealing with Xanax all of these years. But it's something that we never talk about. We never bring it to the table. And we have all, you know, experienced someone in our families or even ourselves and just have not admitted to, you know, being depressed, being anxious. You know, we're about to go into the fall now and headed into winter. We know that seasonal changes, you know, people, you have those winter blues. They are truly real, and sometimes people don't understand why they're sad during the winter, and they just don't talk about it, not realizing that there is something that they can do about it. So we have to normalize mental health. We have to normalize getting the help that we need when we find ourselves in those situations. So food for thought for today.
Food for thought. We're going to be good and full today. And hopefully people will be encouraged to when they know something about it, to do something about it. And maybe, you know, may not have the same signs, may not be the same signals as our guests, but if you know that something is not, it doesn't feel right to you, being able to do something about it and reach out for that. That's going to be important.
Yes. Well, I'm headed to the buffet, so you go ahead and get us started and introduce our guests. So,
welcome to Sunday Brunch. Welcome to Sunday Brunch. Keisha, let everybody know your last name too.
Hello. Keisha Brewington here.
Brewington, the one and only Keisha Brewington. Do tell us a little bit about your journey. You've been through so many aspects of, like, you've been in the military, you're a mom, but you've dealt with some other aspects too, mental health wise. So how did you realize that maybe there was an issue or a concern?
Well, first, thank you again for even just having this topic. It's, as Mason said, that especially in our community, African American community, we don't talk about it. So I have recently, over the past few years, been posting a lot about it, and it's still just one of those things where hush, hush, hush in the Black community. But I'm here to say this is 25 years in the making to get me to speak on this today. 25 years of me finding my voice. So I would say that I've had 25 years of trauma treatment.
Okay.
I have a really, really good team. It started when I had left the military, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but the military has a term called military sexual trauma. It's called MST, and a lot of women in the military suffer from that or have been subjected to that. And I was one of those women. But you think you leave the military and you move on, and you think that's behind me. So I started working at the Hampton VA, which is, by Hampton University, and my boss, tall, 6-foot African-American man who had a very angry personality style. And not just to me, to everybody. Like his supervisory style included a lot of yelling, a lot of insults, a lot of threatening. And so I began to be symptomatic at work. Like every time he would talk to me, I would be in shell shock. And I couldn't figure out what is going on with me.
You feel like you were at war.
I felt like, well, let me go back. Not only did I have military sexual trauma, I was also abused, domestic violence.
Okay.
So when he would talk, I would automatically just run away. And it would get to a point where I couldn't even work. Like I would be around him and he'd talk to me, and it wasn't just me. This was how he talked to everybody. So I wasn't singled out. But I was the only one that was responsive or responding to the way. I would hyperventilate every time he came around me. I was sweating. I would run away. And then he would say, well, if you keep walking away from me, I'm going to write you up. So I'm like, okay, something's going on with me. Something is not right.
That fight or flight was kicking in.
It was kicking in.
She was straight running.
Right.
So he yelled at me one day about some work that apparently I didn't do right, and I worked in human resources.
Okay.
It wasn't like we had a job where there should be any yelling going on. So he yelled at me, and I immediately ran out of the office. He said he was going to write me up. So I went to employee health and went to my doctor. I had a therapist at the time, and she's like, you are re-experiencing what your abuser, you're re-experiencing that. That's why you're acting this way. You have PTSD. And I'm like, no, that's a war thing. You don't have PTSD. I resisted that diagnosis. So she kind of ran down all the things that I was experiencing. And I was like, I still don't have PTSD. Because to me, PTSD meant you were in a war. You were in some catastrophic, event, earthquake, fire, things like that. I just couldn't accept that diagnosis. So I resisted it for a while. And so I would come in our office and I would say, hey, I'm struggling. Just give me a pill, make it all go away. And she's like, no, baby, you got to do the work.
That's right.
You have to do the work. And I was like, what does that even mean? And so that's kind of when we dug in. And here it is 25 years later. And I'm still doing the work, but differently than I was when I first started.
And that's when you were saying you were just pushing back on the diagnosis, unfortunately PTSD is one of those things that most people do just associate with going to war, being in the military, or veterans. And the reality is anyone can suffer from PTSD.
Absolutely.
Based on the trauma or anything that's happened in their lives that create those types of symptoms.
Yes.
And so we really have to look at the symptomology as it relates to some of the things that we're dealing with in the mental health realm, and not necessarily assign those diagnoses to a particular population only.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
It does. Now, I am a veteran as well. So it didn't really sit right with me that we have people over here in war who are getting their, bodies blown up, and here I am at home talking about I have PTSD. There's a stigmatism to that. Why do you have this? Where did this come from?
You didn't think you were worthy enough.
I didn't think I was worthy enough.
Enough.
But I was symptomatic. I was so symptomatic that on a Friday, and people don't leave government jobs ever. I mean, you're in it until you retire most of the time, because they're hard jobs to get. It was a Friday. I was in my office. I knew I was never going to go back to work. When I left out of there that Friday, I knew that I needed to dedicate 100% of my time to get well. So I never looked back.
Kudos to you for really taking care of yourself.
But I also had 2 kids and a mortgage, and didn't know how I was gonna make it. But God was like, I'm opening this door for you. You got to walk through it. I'll make a way. So I said I was going to dig in deep, and I work on my mental health 100% of the time.
That is awesome. So what did that look like for you, just letting it go? just
Because that could be anxiety provoking for some people, but you need it to be able
You mean
to.
letting go of the job?
yes.
Well, the job was contributing. Like, it was exacerbating, like, my symptoms.
Okay.
Like, it gets to the point where I'd sit in my office and I'd lock my door and just cry all day. Every time my boss would come around, I would just be like, I can't be around
Finding
this.
reasons not to go to work,
Yeah.
not to be there. Yeah.
Calling in, you know, being there but not really being there. You know, the work is piling up. And so I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring, but at that moment, I knew that I couldn't continue. No, I didn't quit. I just didn't go back.
Okay.
So there's a difference.
Okay, so
There's a difference. There's a difference. So initially, when I decided I can't go back into that office, I have an HR background, and one of the ladies that I work with, she's like, you know, you can retire. And I'm like, how? I've only been working here 7 years. I don't have the time in service to retire. And she said, because, and this is how the military works, I was abused in the U.S. by my partner, but I was still active duty. So they consider that an injury, military injury.
Okay.
So even though I wasn't at war, I still was active duty.
Okay.
So my injuries, even though you can't see them, I was still suffering.
Okay.
So the government looks at that as she was injured during service.
Okay.
Yeah. So my job at the VA, they had told me that I could apply for retirement. I'm like, how is this going to work? I'm 7 years in. You know, how am I going to retire? They approved my retirement. Not only did they approve my retirement, the VA then said, we're going to pay you too because you were injured in service. So I was just like, God, and if I had never walked through that door to say I need, because I didn't know all this before I decided not to, you know, go back to work. He was just like, just walk through the door. I'm gonna provide for you. And so I was able to then just kind of dedicate the rest of my time, 100% of my time, to work on my mental health. And when I tell you I dug in deep, I dug in deep. Like, I've been inpatient for 30 days.
Okay.
We have a women's trauma recovery program for military sexual trauma.
Okay.
You know, I've done DBT, I've done CPT, I've done exposure therapy, radical acceptance, mindfulness, EMDR.
Okay.
My whole team, and I know this, a lot of veterans don't get the kind of care that I've gotten. I just feel like God's kind of wrapped the angels around me, because the kind of care that I have received is, to me, is not the norm.
Right.
It's almost like I'm being propelled up to get, you know, to get the help that I needed that a lot of people just can't get. My team really goes to bat for me and my wellness.
That is awesome. And the fact that you're willing to accept the help, you know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Sometimes people that have insurance that will cover certain services, they're not willing to do so. And especially when they think it's going to really disrupt their lives versus really helping them to put their lives back together.
Well, it's a process, because as I said, I was resistant to even the diagnosis. But that's what happens when you have a really good team. When they're not trying to just force you; they're walking with you. So when you have a good therapist, not only do I have a therapist, I had a psychiatrist, I have a music therapist, I have acupuncture. I have a whole team. And when the whole team is rooting for you, and they're not just forcing you to get well, they're like, "Hey, we're gonna walk beside you. We're gonna get there." Now, mind you, it didn't feel good in the midst of it. It was hard. Like, exposure therapy means that you are actually talking about the trauma to other people out loud over and over and over again. And in that process, you're breaking down, like you're ripping the Band-Aid off, you know. And every time you do that, you're back at one. And so every time I would
Sometimes
go,
it feels like -0.
yes, over and over.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's been 25 years, so I didn't just take a class and be like, okay, now I'm better.
Right.
You know, I didn't just go to therapy one time and say, hey, I'm better. This has been 25 years, and so even though I'm on the other side, I'm still doing 100% of my 100% of wellness to take care of my mental health. Like, I'm not doing the hard trauma therapy anymore, but just the wellness piece, so that I don't get pulled back into, because people don't realize I'm operating from a heal space, but the diagnosis is still there.
Right.
So that doesn't go away. You can learn how to manage your symptoms. And so that's what I'm doing, is managing my symptoms. And people, I see like my friends, they'll say, "Oh, I don't have any issues," but you can see it because one, they're overeating, they're drugging, they're drinking, they're sexing, they're doing all these unhealthy habits, and they think, "Oh, I'm just gonna have a drink." But usually that's what Larry, like you're kind of covering the pain up, saying, "Hey, I'm fine," self-medicating, and I don't do any of those things. Thank God that like I said, I had a great team. I haven't gone down that wrong road. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for a great team.
That's amazing that you have a team.
Yeah.
And you're doing multiple things. To address the issue. You're not just addressing it from one area. I like you said the acupuncture. I mean, just so many different elements that you've included.
Acupuncture, kayaking, I mean, all of it. So once you do the hard work, as far as like some of the exposure and the harder stuff, then you're able to say, okay, I can now do some recreational therapy to try to combat the symptoms. So normally you can find me, out here. Most Black people don't go kayaking. I know that. But normally I'm out here kayaking. I'm skiing. Like the VA is really big now on recreational therapy.
Okay.
I can go free of charge, skiing, kayaking, fishing, all of it, anytime.
I've seen your videos.
Anytime.
I've seen you live to the extreme that way.
Yeah, and that's
and encourage other veterans to
do the
also,
same.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't even know that it was a whole recreational piece. My therapist, my team was like, you've done all this hard work. We want to see you enjoy some of your life. We're gonna push you into this recreational therapist. And I was like, what is that? And now, I mean, it's amazing how you can be on the water, kayaking.
I've seen you camping.
Yeah, that's another thing. Camping in the woods, which we don't do as African Americans.
Right.
But it's such.
I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak for this one. I'm not going.
It's such a holistic space to be in the woods where you're unplugged. You're with nature, and everything is off. You don't get to turn the TV on and be like, "Well, I'm gonna blast out, these feelings I'm feeling." You have to kind of be in your stuff, and you have to kind of listen and live. And it's so therapeutic to be in the woods. I mean, yes, I was a little scared that the black bear was gonna come and get me, but once it was over, I was like, I'm gonna do this again. The first time was a little rough for me because we had little outhouses and yeah, it was a lot. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it was a lot. And then sleeping in a tent, there's bugs and they're cooking on the grill, nobody's washing their hands, and you're just like, okay. But at the end of the camping experience, I was better than leaving than before I came. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this.
That made a difference.
It does. It really does. You don't even realize.
Who you surround yourself with. I can imagine that other people also, that was a very great healing process for them to experience that. You guys experience together. It's probably no judgment in those regards because you can understand that you're coming from.
Yeah, imagine sitting around a campfire and just talking. Not even about your trauma, just whatever you want to talk about. Just having like-minded people support you in that way. It feels really good. Things that you can't talk to your girlfriend or your family about. You can just talk to other people who are like you. And it's actually an amazing experience.
Because it somewhat normalizes your situation. Not that it's normal in terms of why, the trauma that happened, but the fact that, hey, it happened.
It happened.
But it doesn't have to debilitate me, and you can look at the symptoms that kind of spring up and learn how to manage those symptoms so that they don't lead you down a dark path of drinking and drugging and things of that nature.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk about when we look at people with addictions, in most cases, that has come from a place of people who have been in some type of trauma.
Yes.
They are medicating themselves,
Yes.
And before, we really didn't look at some of the areas of trauma that we look at now as we look at those adverse childhood experiences. We start talking about people living in poverty, homelessness, and stuff like that. And so people are now self-medicating themselves to deal with those feelings that they don't understand and they don't know how to manage or where to put those feelings. And so it's good that...
And the levels of trauma, people don't even know about these different levels. Like, you're just piling trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. You mentioned, like, you were there and you were having PTSD in the office with your boss, but that you also then mentioned that it reminded you of a domestic violence situation, that you may not have even realized those two things were initially linked.
I didn't.
Sometimes people have trauma that happens in childhood, too, that they didn't even realize that they were originally traumatized then, and they're focusing on something that happened later in adulthood, because how you talked about how you felt different classifying that as trauma compared to what happened to other people. But it's still traumatizing for you.
Still traumatizing for me, and just to piggyback off of what you said, like, even in being in therapy, realizing that I had childhood trauma as well. I mean, that's one of the things that's good about therapy, is not only does it deal with your today's stuff, it takes you back so you can realize, like, how did I even get here? Like, how did I even get with a partner who was abusive? Like, that stems from a loss that I had as a child, trying to fill that void with, unhealthy relationships.
Right.
So that was a big healing space for me, too, is to go back to my childhood where it began, to kind of heal those layers of trauma along the way. Because, I mean, you can go into an office and say, hey, this is my problem. But really, it starts way before, you show up to the therapist's office. It shows up when you're 12. Like, my inner child is still reeling. She's better, but she's still reeling from things that come up now that I'm operating in a heal space. She's like, oh, no,
You're more aware.
I'm more,
now.
yeah, she's loud. Like, she's
and she's screaming from time to time.
Yeah, like, I have a 13-year-old daughter whose father just came into her life. And for years, she would cry about not having a dad. And I grew up without my mom. And every time she would cry about it, my inner child was like, I'm crying too. And I would just try to just push her down. So now I just kind of make space for her. I'm like, okay, I feel you, I hear you, we're going to be okay. And a lot of people don't do that. They don't realize that the inner child is a lot of times the one that's acting out, even as we are as adults. The inner
so
child.
you were crying and screaming, essentially, like, I understand where you're coming from. You're missing your father. I miss my mom. And, just you sharing that's deep.
It is.
Because in our communities, people typically miss their fathers more often than they miss their mothers. And so for you to be a woman then raised by your father in the absence of your mom.
Yeah. Now, it's not that my mom disappeared. My dad was in the Air Force, so we traveled a lot. So we were overseas, and my mom would be in the States. So logistically, we just couldn't see her. But it was traumatic for me as a child.
But you ended up with your father traveling and not with your mother staying in the States.
Yes. Yes, that part. Like that hook, that part. So when my daughter would cry about her dad, I would be like, oh, why is this wounding me? Like, why am I so triggered by my 13-year-old saying she misses her dad? And so I had to make space for that. That was part of the healing, too, to make space for this.
She has her own.
She has her own. And so now that I've done that, I'm feeling full circle. Like, I'm feeling like, okay, not only did I address my adult trauma, I'm also addressing my childhood trauma. And when you do both, it's just a much better, I don't know which word I'm trying to use. Much better outcome. Thank you. A much better outcome. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, we don't realize all of the stuff that we're stuffing, all of our feelings and emotions and stuff like that, as it relates to trauma or being hurt. Yeah. We kind of stuff those things and hold them in, which create a whole nother set of problems and challenges. But when you start to let some of those things out, like, for example, your daughter, you had empathy for your daughter because, of course, she was hurting behind her father, and you could relate to those feelings. And as you began to let some of those things out, guess what? All of that other stuff started coming out too. And that's the thing, And so as we look at those things, you just can't say only let out joy, only let out happiness. When you open that up, exactly,
going back in there. Yeah.
When you open yourself up to feel all of the other emotions, you're going to feel everything, and all of it's going to come out. And unfortunately, what ends up happening when we do that, it comes out jumbled up and confused, and it looks
really
like
does.
rage.
It does.
It does.
It looks
It
like
does.
rage, and some people think it's just anger. It's like, no, it's
hurt.
everything.
And everything else wrapped around it.
Exactly. So we really have to, dig a little deeper into what is going on with that rage. And that's why instead of asking, why are you behaving a certain way or why are you acting like this, we have to really address the area of what happened to
What
you.
happened to you?
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
And see,
I
didn't-
find it's hard sometimes when people are addressing what happened to you, and you're now sitting in the fact of now I'm acknowledging this is what's
acknowledging,
happening to
yeah.
me. That doesn't make it easy for the other people around your circle sometimes. And for them sometimes they may feel like you're pointing the finger at them, like you did this to me. But it's saying, even if you did do this to me, I'm still owning this as a part of my healing. This happened to me. I have the right to say that this happened to me, and the feelings that come along with those things.
Yeah, the more that I speak out about my story, the more uncomfortable my friends and family are with my voice. And I'm not even pointing a finger at anybody, just it makes them uncomfortable for me to talk about, domestic violence or abuse or military sexual trauma or the fact that I even have PTSD. My dad says, "You don't have PTSD, you didn't go to war." I'm like, and that's okay.
That's his understanding.
That's his understanding.
Right,
That's okay.
right.
It's not my job to try to convince other people. I'm not going to put this diagnosis on myself. Like, I'm not, if I could trade to not have, because people don't realize when you have PTSD, you're hypervigilant. You don't like to be in crowds. Like, for me to be out here doing things is a lot. So normally if you do see me out going skiing, normally I have to go back and retreat for a few days because it's so loud out there. And I feel like sometimes I'm going to get shot in the back or somebody's going to hurt me or kill me. That feeling doesn't ever go away. So people don't realize that, yes, I may not present like I have mental health issues, but this is what mental health looks like. Yeah.
I think that is the most important thing, that people don't have any idea what mental health looks like. Because guess what? It looks like everybody. It looks like
Everybody.
just the people you're sitting right next to. It looks like real people with real concerns. And it's not always to the extreme, or sometimes it is. It's so many different things. And when we try to force people to be one thing, we're also not allowing them to be the things that they actually are.
Right.
And hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely.
And so if you're not able to openly address it, you will bleed on people who never even cut you.
And that's one of the things I've learned in therapy is a lot of times if I see somebody acting out or if they're unkind to me, I always consider everybody involved. Like, they're not operating in a good space. It's really not even about me. They're bothered about something else. And so I'm able to just kind of say, what, I'm not going to interject my 2 cents.
I'm not entertaining you.
I'm not
today.
entertaining that, but I also can make space for them and say they're not okay. We'll talk another time. So it's really important to create healthy boundaries with your friends and your family. It's been a time where I didn't even talk to my mom or my dad because they were uncomfortable with my story, which included them, but I wasn't pointing the finger at them. But just the fact that I was talking about it, that was the problem.
They'd rather you not.
Well, it gets back to every black person. You think about it. You're told what happens in this house stays in this house.
Yeah.
And it's just that whole secretive side of anything that was going on, whether it was abuse or, whatever was happening in the house, what happens in this house stays in this house.
in the
You
house.
don't talk to anyone else about what's going on. And so the fact that you're talking about those things, it makes people uncomfortable. I get parents in sometimes, and they'll come in and talk about what's going on with their kids. And when the kids really start telling them what's been happening, okay, whether it's been abuse or they miss their one of their parents or something like that, if there's a divorce or whatever, or even some of the situations that may have occurred, and parents start hearing these things, it's almost like they want to shut it down. But it's like you really have to embrace it so that you can hear what's going on if you really want to fix the symptomology and make a difference and all. Because if I tell you that, hey, what you're doing is stepping on my toes, okay? And if you continue to step on my toes, that's intentional. at that point. Once I've had this conversation with you and you continue to do these things over and over again, it's intentional, because otherwise you should make a conscious effort not to do those things to hurt me when I've told you that those things hurt me.
Yeah.
If you care.
Exactly.
If you care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to continue in a relationship, even friendship, that's
all
a
of it.
relationship.
All
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. And so when you start talking about these things, it really does make people uncomfortable, because one, they sometimes have to recognize their own personal trauma.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a
Kind of what happened
situation
with your daughter.
Yes.
So when you brought it up,
Yeah.
it forced you to go back to that moment when she brought it up.
Yes.
But it also makes them have to own it. If they were a part of your trauma.
Yeah.
That's the piece. And I know sometimes, having worked with people who have been molested and sexually assaulted and all, or whatever, one of the things that happens, especially if you have been molested by a family member, the family doesn't want to see that,
They still want to invite those people over for the holidays. They still want you to be a part of it, take the pictures and pretend
Uncle
like
Joe
nothing
is good,
happened.
Uncle Joe didn't do that, and it's like everyone wants to deny, because Uncle Joe is a fun uncle. But guess what? Uncle Joe is molesting the little
a
girls in the
pedophile.
family.
Yes.
Yeah. And it really breaks down the family unit. I've never spoken of this out loud to anybody except for a few close people, but my stepfather molested me. And my mom didn't believe me. And I'm 53. And I'm telling him, like, Mom, he's passed on now. But there was a whole big thing where he was in the hospital dying from cancer. My whole family was like, why are you not there with your mom? Why are you not at the hospital? So I finally said out loud, I cannot go and support this man because he molested me. My whole family turned their back on me because they felt like I should have showed up for my mom. But it's okay, because that was my breakthrough. I needed to say that out loud. Like, I had never really told my family why I wasn't there for my mom. And it's hurtful for my mom, I'm sure, to hear me say that. But that's her. If she doesn't want to believe me, that's her stuff. But I have now spoken it out loud.
I'm so glad you have a team.
Yeah,
You need a team.
I've spoken it out loud. But even with my mom not believing me, and I don't know if she's going to hear this broadcast or not, I have learned to rise up to where she is. That is the only way that I can have a relationship with her, to meet her where she's at. I'm not going to try to convince her otherwise, because if she believes me, that means she now has to look at her story and deal with being with a man who molested her daughter.
Right.
So I am able to rise up to meet my mom where she is, and we have a great relationship to this day.
Because sometimes a question that happens, like, for example, with your mom may be wondering now, when I thought this was going on and I didn't say anything, or did I just not want to see it, so to speak? It's the time when Uncle Joe, every little, all of the nieces come and sit on his lap, and so it's like, people see those things, and then when it comes out that Uncle Joe molested so-and-so, it's like, I thought he was playing a little bit too much with the girls. He never played with the guys, but it was always the girls. He wanted to go get your Barbie doll. Let's come sit on my lap and tell me about your doll, baby. And so you look at those types of situations, and it becomes, what didn't I do? And then they began to have this internal guilt. So sometimes that defense mechanism is, if I tell you that you're lying,
it's easier.
It's easier to manage this guilt because I'm not fully acknowledging your truth.
Yeah.
I want to have the conversation at the table to encourage the listeners and other people to stop that, because that's some very hurtful things. When someone hurts you and you don't acknowledge that that person has actually been hurt, and by you not even being supportive, sometimes it makes them feel as if they're not worthy or to be protected, or what's different about me. That's some very hurtful things. And we even saw that kind of like with the Kirk Franklin story that came out about how his mother was not able to acknowledge what had happened and occurred. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're hurting somebody else in the process, and you keep this generation of hurt just going and just passing it along. It doesn't mean that you can change how somebody feels, but it is important to acknowledge how they feel. If we're going to be in a real relationship, you should be able to acknowledge that this is hurtful for me. And it's not, in your situation, they wanted you to be there for her in a moment when no one was there. That's a weird thing to ask a victim to do. And a lot of times as victims or as people who have been through trauma, you tend to want to not want to traumatize anybody else, or you tend to not want to take up too much room, or you feel like you're taking up too much room, or you're too needy about this, when it's not about that.
No.
It's the fact that you were wrong. And let's not sweep this under the rug and pretend like this never happened. And a lot of families, our families, want to pretend like things never happened.
Well, a lot of times they don't have the capacity to even speak that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm speaking it because I've had all these.
You've had some help.
I've had some help.
Yeah.
So I'm able to
Right.
speak it. But a lot of times our community doesn't have the capacity to be able to say, I support you even though this is hurting me to support you, or I support you because this happened to you. We don't have the capacity for that.
But we can. Some of us can. So when we know better, like every week
Yeah.
we say,
Yeah.
Yes.
we can do better. And
We can
so
do
I
better.
want to encourage people to do better. Think outside of yourself when other people are hurt. And it's okay that it makes you uncomfortable, but understand how uncomfortable that can make that individual.
And we have to recognize too that it's not just about getting validation.
Right.
It's about hearing it. You know, that you speak that truth out.
Yeah.
You share it. Even if you have to write it down. I know
Yeah.
there are times in therapy, especially when it's in a situation when a person has passed on, you know,
Yeah, you
Uncle
can't
Joe
stop-
has
yeah.
died, and
Right.
you can't confront Uncle Joe.
Right.
You know, the question sometimes is, would he even admit it, number one? But the fact that you can sit down and write a letter to Uncle Joe and tell him what he did to you and how that makes you feel, it's releasing. You know, you're letting all of that stuff go on the inside, at least bringing it to a place that now I've acknowledged it. Now I've spoken this out loud. I've heard it. Other people have heard it. And so now it's time for me to start the healing process. And your healing is selfish because it's about you, and it's okay
Absolutely.
to be in that place. It's not about mom even acknowledging it. Okay? This is about you. This is about how you're going to handle this yourself.
Yeah.
Because you
That's
have
the
to
only
be
thing you can
responsible for
control.
you.
It's you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
We can't
it.
control what other people do. All we can control is how we respond to it.
Yeah, well, I have done a really, I would say, decent job of cultivating the type of relationship with both of my parents.
Okay.
But they needed to hear my story.
Yeah.
So, but now we are such in a good space. It was uncomfortable. It probably still is if I bring up certain things, but my truth needed it to be heard. I mean, and I am such a better mom. So I even had to apologize because I have a 29-year-old and a 27-year-old. I've apologized to them for not being the mother, not being able to show up for them as a mom because I was in my stuff. I couldn't. I was unavailable. I was, you know, just trying to make it. I couldn't mother properly. So now they see me mothering a 13-year-old and I'm just all in. So I've had
I feel some kind of way
Yes.
about
Oh,
that.
yeah. I hear it, yeah.
But do you share with them?
I do.
About the aspect of how you were missing your mother?
Well, not just
growing
that,
up?
not just missing my mother, but I'm dealing with all this trauma now.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I mean, I'm not only my mom wasn't there, but I had all this trauma. So
Yeah.
I would come home from work before I left the job, and I would just close my door.
Yeah.
I was unavailable.
Yeah.
Fix yourself something to eat. Do your own homework.
Figure it out.
And now
Be more independent than that.
yes, and now they see me with my 13, and they're just like,
How dare you?
yeah. And so I've had to go back and apologize that I wasn't able to be there for them the way that I should have been. And I told them, and I explained to them why.
That's good
know?
work right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That's good
That
work.
is so powerful.
Yeah, it is.
because that's how you break chains.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You break that generational cycle
Yeah.
of abuse. You know, people always talk about curses, but I just talk about cycles. But you break that cycle and that mindset, whereas they may feel like I wasn't worthy.
Yeah.
You did this to me, but now they understand. You
You
know,
took responsibility.
I took
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
right? It doesn't change what happened.
No, it doesn't change.
But it acknowledges their feelings of not feeling love, maybe, or whatever they felt. It acknowledges those feelings for them, which now, if they need therapy, they can get past this. How do
And
you-
they can also
Yeah.
see what it's done for you.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they've seen you in
They've
the
seen.
midst of that, and now they can see where you are now. And you're
Right.
like, thank God and thank therapy.
Yeah.
Thank God and
Absolutely.
thank therapy.
No, I mean they weren't misused or abused any of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
I was just unavailable.
Right.
I don't even know if
You
I can
told the
define.
truth. No, you told the truth. You were
Yeah.
emotionally unavailable.
Right. Emotionally
in so many
unavailable.
ways. It was
Yeah.
hard for you to show up for
Show
other
up.
people
Yeah.
when you're having a hard time showing up for yourself. So
Yeah.
you were just trying to survive. You weren't survival mode.
Survival mode.
And so they saw you in survival mode. Now they see you like in thrival mode. Like,
Yeah, they see me in
yeah.
like this, you know.
You're happy, you're smiling.
I'm engaged. And
Yeah.
they're like,
see, you added a whole nother layer. So now
Yeah.
you're in a healthy relationship.
Right.
yeah.
They're seeing you in that atmosphere. So how, so now you're happy with someone.
Yeah.
And she's getting attention.
Yeah.
And you're showing up for her.
And showing up. Yeah.
So
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
I would say, even just sitting here talking about it, sometimes, because I almost lost my life to domestic violence. Like I literally, God spared my life. That I'll just leave it there. So even just to be able to sit here and be able to share my story, that I'm still
different
alive.
levels of the,
Yeah, there's
I didn't
different levels.
realize your story was to that extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with my partner, which was my children's father, my ex-husband, I didn't want the kids to grow up like I grew up without having both parents. So I sacrificed my own self to let him still come to the house for Christmas. Not sacrifice myself in an unhealthy way, but I was able to separate out him being the kid's father versus...
You compartmentalized so that
Yeah.
they could still have their dad,
Yes.
even though that was your abuser.
Yes, and so in doing that, I can honestly say me and my ex-husband are in a really good space. Just because I was able to just kind of separate out, okay, where I'm not with him anymore, he's the kid's father. I'm going to let him still show up in their life. Because I needed to have my family unit together. I didn't want a repeat of like my childhood, So for Christmas, he's at my house, and I'm sitting here like, how am I letting this abuser at my house? So this is what happens when you have a good treatment team.
I
Right.
would more than a treatment team for that, 'cause I promise you.
But he never crossed the line. So if it was Christmas, it was there to open gifts and, go about your way.
When did he earn these amazing boundaries? Like,
Well, it was more or less growing up without two parents.
Yeah.
That's the choice. Either you don't have both of your parents on Christmas, or you spend half of the Christmas at my house and half. I didn't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
So I actually said, okay, I'm gonna separate out this man. He is the children's father, and not somebody who abused me. That's the only way that I could operate in that space. And so 20 plus years later, now he'll be like, hey, are you and Anderson okay? Do y'all need anything? I mean, it's crazy how the way that I showed up allowed him to show up differently in my life. Now, we don't see each other. We don't talk regularly, but we have two adult kids. And sometimes, stuff happens with adult kids. We can call each other just to be able to operate.
if they have kids,
If they have, all
you
of
are
it.
going to be grandparents.
Grandparents and the kids. Like, we're able to operate as parents. And to be able to say that wholeheartedly and say that I feel safe operating with him as parents is huge for me, because at one point I couldn't even be in the same room with him.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
You said you almost died.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother level
Yeah.
of personal sacrifice, and you're speaking towards the trauma that you had and not trying to relive that trauma with your kids, but
Yeah.
you're then taking a sacrifice and a hit again
Yeah.
of your own personal peace and space to ensure the safety or what someone else may feel, because you're trying to avoid what they may feel. But I'm wondering, did they witness some of that domestic violence? Did they see some of those things? Did they understand some of those
I don't
aspects?
think so, because
Okay.
they were 3 and 1
Okay.
when I finally left. Because that's the thing about domestic violence. You don't leave the first time. They say they're sorry, and next thing you know, you're in a vicious cycle. You don't really know you're
They
in a
call it the
cycle.
honeymoon phase.
Yeah, you don't, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. I'm like, okay, he said he was
They
sorry.
go to church, they go to AA, they do all those things. They tell you they're going to find Jesus. It's the
Yeah,
honeymoon
all of
phase.
it. All of it. So I'm like, okay, he said he was sorry. Then here it happens again, and you're just like, what is happening? So I need to leave. So I took the kids 3 and 1. So I want to say they didn't, but I'm not sure. They were really super young when, and they know my story. I don't sugarcoat the reason why I'm not with their dad. They know. I mean, their dad's been in jail. I mean, he's military too. I mean, they know that we have some sort of history. So for them to be able to see us operate in a healthy way, I'm sure is huge for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a plus. I mean,
Restorative for him too. that
Right.
you
Yeah.
allowed him to
Oh,
say.
yeah, yeah.
And it does make a difference when, even though parents split up for whatever reason, that you can find ways to come together in
Yeah.
a healthy way.
In a healthy way.
You know, to parent your children or to be there. Because if you have children in common, it's you're going to be in a place that
Yeah.
now people have to decide, who do I invite to this? You know,
Right.
it's a baby shower. Do I invite mom or do I invite dad?
It happens all the time.
All the
With them
time.
Weddings, graduations.
And that's trauma for a child to have
Yeah.
to to have to decide, am I going to go to my mom's house or go to my dad's house? And I didn't want that for my kids. I didn't want them to choose between me and their dad. Yes, it was difficult to operate in that space, but now that I look back on it, and like I said, I had a really good team. Like my team was on my side, you know, guiding me through this. So yeah. Yeah.
And that's something when working with kids sometimes who come in for services, trying to help the parents understand it's their stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's affecting this child's behavior and all. And so that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes when you're trying to explain to a parent, okay, this is what this kid has indicated, you know, and getting the place. Because one of the things I work towards is having the kids to be able to communicate with parents. I get them to a place that they're willing to talk to me. But then I say, okay, what would it look like if you were to share this with mom or share this with dad?
Yeah.
So them being able to come back out and say, hey, I don't feel loved. I don't feel this. I don't feel that, you know, and putting the parent in a place to just hear it, you
Without
know,
responding.
Don't react to what they say, because if a child says, I don't feel loved, you need to understand
how they feel.
That's how they feel.
Right, and what their definition of love is. And sometimes when a person has been through certain traumas, like in your situation, you were not emotionally available. That was emotional neglect for your kids, and they internalized some of that.
Absolutely.
You know, and so the fact that you even now acknowledge it, you're talking to them about it or whatever, it validates how they felt. Like, so it wasn't just me. I wasn't
tripping.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't me.
Yeah. Because oftentimes when kids say, I don't feel loved, what do you mean? I go to work every day. I put a roof over your head. I do this. I do that.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I bought that bacon you eating. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it really gets to that place. And that's not how they define
or
love.
how they feel loved.
Or how they feel loved.
Absolutely. And not just children, people in general.
Yeah.
So you speak into those love languages of how people receive love and what it looks like for them, and how you show up for other people. I think it's so powerful, Keisha, that you have begun to not just show up for other people, but you're showing up for yourself.
That part.
and that's major. You know, when other people have overlooked you, you know, self-care is not selfish. We keep saying that, and you can't help other people. But I think unless you're helping yourself, and I feel like you demonstrating what that good work looks like, long-term work. Some people think it's a short-term type of thing. You know, like, oh, I can just go in, take a few pills, or I can just go in for a few sessions and I'm done. But you being so honest and transparent and saying that you've been going through this process for 25 plus years. That's good work. Understanding that you're going to always be working on these issues. And people who think that you're going to stop and never work again, they're highly deceived.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I have to do the work.
You have to.
I have to. I mean, that's the only, not just to be happy, but to be well.
To be well.
To be well. Yeah,
to be
you have to
healthy.
do the work.
Right.
Yes.
Because otherwise you create other problems. You know,
do.
I've seen situations where you have a parent who was abused as a child, molested and things of that nature, and yet they have now put their own children in this emotional, unstable place with their behaviors.
Right.
And they don't understand that their behaviors are actually abusive to their children. You know, and you wonder why your children are at school fighting. You wonder why your children are fighting you. You understand?
Right.
And
Drinking
so,
and
yes,
doing all kinds
running
of
away from home.
Yeah.
You know, you really have to look at what's going on with you as an adult, as a parent, and own it, you know, and really be willing to look at it. I remember years ago, I went to a conference, and the presenter threw out a statistic, and he was like 87% of the issues that our children face are brought on by adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it, but he said, you're talking divorce, separation. He used domestic violence because this was a domestic violence conference that I went to. But he talked about those things, and whereas you think your children may not see it, witness it, or feel it, they do.
They do.
And they see it from you.
Oh, absolutely.
So they don't have to be in the room when it's happening, but they can see the aftermath and how you respond and look at the world. If you don't trust people, they take those things on too. They internalize those things too. It's kind of like we have the same politics as our parents. And not necessarily because they ever spoke about it or didn't, but you start to see those things. You start to see how people respond to things, and you make your own natural assumptions based on that.
Absolutely.
How who interacts with who avoids who. And so that's just some good work, Keisha.
Yeah, I try really hard to, because I mean, sometimes I'm still symptomatic with the PTSD. Not
Absolutely.
sometimes. A lot of the times I'm still symptomatic. And I get checked by my 13-year-old because sometimes I'll get agitated by something, just normal, whatever. And she'll be like, why are you yelling?
Why am I yelling?
Why am I yelling? Like, this is not even worth a yell. Like, why am I yelling? And sometimes that mirror be like, okay, I need to figure out what this is. Why am I agitated? You
What
know,
this is really
what this is real. What is really going on with me that my 13-year-old is saying that I'm
You tripping.
I'm tripping. Like, you know, she's like, why are you yelling? You could just tell me, you know. You know, and so then I was like, okay, let me go back
And see, some parents will start yelling even more.
No,
but I like the fact that you could hear that.
That I can hear
and
it.
see yourself.
Yeah.
Because that shows that you've been doing work.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times parents don't understand they can learn as much from their kids
my
as
God.
they teach their kids.
Absolutely.
So it's usually that hierarchy
Yeah.
that really messes things up. So it's
Yeah.
nice that you can hear her,
Yeah.
see her,
Yeah.
and then make the adjustment. So
Make
you're
the
not
adjustment.
even just talking about it, but you're going to be about it, and you're going to make that
Absolutely.
adjustment.
Sometimes I'll be like, I'm not yelling, but then I'll be like, okay, I did yell.
maybe I did
I
yell.
did. I did yell, and I'll be, you know, I'll go back later and I'll apologize to her because that's not how I want to show up as a mom. But you know, the day-to-day stuff, you're running here, running there. Sometimes your voice may elevate,
Right.
but my voice elevating should not be projected onto my child. Like if I'm agitated about something, she should not have to feel my agitation.
But I like that you could be real enough to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And with her. And for her, it speaks volumes that she was comfortable enough to say that to you. Because I think the trauma that's happened with kids in the past, too, is adults have not allowed them to label those things as trauma and to have their own feelings and to say this is a problem. Adults tend to tell kids what to feel instead of understanding what they feel. So it's nice that she felt comfortable enough to tell you how she felt and that she would be received.
Hence why my older kids are looking at her like
Yep, because you would have probably went off had they treat you like that.
did she really just yeah.
Like, who are you to ask me why I'm yelling?
Yeah.
And it's also a generational thing of how we've been raised. And your kids are in different generations.
They are. These new kids are just different.
Yeah.
They're different.
And COVID didn't help.
No, they're just different. They're different. But I'm glad that I get a retake with you know. And she has, even though it wasn't my plan to have another child, she has helped me show up in life because I don't think my healing journey would have been as successful. Because a lot of times when you have PTSD or depression or anxiety, it's hard to get up out of the bed sometimes. But when you have somebody you have to take to school,
Yeah.
they don't
She
want to
forced
hear.
you to
Yeah,
live.
she forced me to live, and so I'm like, okay, this is the gift that just keeps giving. Yeah,
What a
Yeah.
blessing.
yeah,
I'm still done.
Yeah.
I still don't want any more kids.
I don't want any more kids either, Tamara.
You
Please.
think, yes, I don't need them
No.
popping up.
No.
no, thank you. Let that ministry pass from me. But I do like the way that you were able to express that you, before you were not able to show up because you were more into your stuff, but as you were able to get this work, you were able to see the difference that you could make, and you wanted to do something differently. You've obviously done it so much so that the kids have noticed that there's a difference.
The kids have noticed that there's a difference.
But now you get to parent them in a different way.
I do.
And so it's never too late.
It's
They
never
can
too
still
late.
get that same love. It's just a different age.
Yes.
But I think they still appreciate the fact that you acknowledged and said, I'm wrong. You apologize.
I apologized.
And adults typically have a hard time apologizing to kids. So I think that is some good stuff that our listeners could definitely pick up from.
Good.
Exactly. Now, do you have grandkids with your older kids yet?
No, I do not.
Okay. Because I was going to say, when grandkids come, you're going to be even more different with them. You know,
No, not yet. Not
people
yet.
tend to lose their mind when grandkids come along. Grandkids get away with everything.
Well, that's how
and-
they're feeling about this 13-year-old. They're like, what is going on? Why is she eating in her room? I'm like,
Oh, yes.
we had to eat at the table, and you're not at the table, you don't eat, you know, so.
Grant, it does change. It
Yes.
does change. When
so
I
they
was
may be
growing up.
ready for what's to come when they start having children. You know,
They
because
better get ready.
They better get ready.
Exactly. Because we grew up, you don't open the refrigerator unless you ask and all or whatever.
You better not.
Listen, when my son came along, my mother had his little shelf. He could go in the refrigerator and pull all his little snacks off of the shelf and all or whatever.
Anytime he got good and ready.
Yes, I thought
When I
that
was
kid had
growing
lost
up,
his mind.
Okay. I was growing up, I couldn't even sit on my mother's bed. could not sit on her bed.
The
It was
bed or
unsure-
the living room couch.
Oh, you do not sit on it.
Yeah.
My daughter came around, she was jumping on her bed. I said, oh, that's a whole nother level. So things do change.
They do.
We tend to understand as we get older, some things are not worth screaming over.
They're not.
There's some things are not worth
Yeah.
fighting over.
They're
and
not.
you tend to prioritize differently. So I think as you get closer to that age, you understand, like,
Yeah, I'm gonna
this
fight
is
my
not
battles.
worth
It's not
arguing
worth
over.
it.
The
Yes.
point is, I love you and I want to spend time with you. I'm so
Yes.
happy that you're around.
Absolutely.
Exactly, and figuring out a way to live. That's the
That
most
part.
important piece there,
Yeah.
living life, because life is going to continue to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how we choose to live. So I've enjoyed this conversation.
I have
and I
too.
do want to thank you for being so transparent with us, with your story. I know that it's not often easy to tell, the traumas and talk about the traumas and stuff like that, but I think our listening audience will certainly benefit from this conversation at the
She
table.
hit all the months.
Yes.
She hit Domestic Violence Month. She also hit, Mental Health Awareness Month. So we
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, so
Well,
thank
I
you.
just appreciate y'all having this discussion, especially like the African American. We don't do this. We don't have open conversations. So thank you for even just having this topic today.
All right. Well, I am Dr. Richard Mason.
I'm Dr. Tamara Williams.
And so thank you for joining us right here at the table on WHOV Smooth 88.1.
The essence of HU.
Keep you forward.
Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you.
Thank you for joining us at the table.
Tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for more delicious topical recipes for life on the Sunday Brunch.
On Smooth 88.1 WHOV.